Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm doing my August 2024 wrap ups, and I was able to finish four books this week, or actually one audiobook and three books. I'm kind of curious if people think that audiobooks are cheating when it comes to accomplishing your goals in reading. I know in the scheme of things it doesn't really matter because everyone's just living their own life, but I'm kind of curious what you think in the comments down below. I just find that since I started to kind of like listen to more celebrity memoirs, or read, I guess, but then I start to listen to them, I find that if they are actually narrating their own memoir or biography, I would like to listen to it because it kind of adds extra oomph to listening to their life story. And I feel like I have read like a few celebrities like Britney Spears, Simu Liu, and Jeanette McCurdy's memoirs, like in a book form. But I find that there are some things like, oh, that would have been delivered way better audio way. So I've just been on this like trend or this kick, sorry, to listen to celebrity memoirs. So comment down below what you think, if it's cheating or not listening to an audiobook every now and then. In August, I was able to read four books. Well, listen to four books, read three books, total four. My first one was Paris, the memoir by Paris Hilton. I gave this a 5 out of 5. I grew up in the 1990s. I was a teenager in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, and I feel like I grew up on Perez Hilton, which was like a celebrity gossip person. That back then I would go on every day, go on his website, read all the stuff that he would report on celebrity gossip. And looking back now in like 2024, it was so toxic. And why were we shaming like all these women who just people in their 20s just having fun and living life? And it just so happens that all their stuff is like out there for people to see and to judge. So it was really fun listening to Paris Hilton's um, I guess like take on things, and she is just sliving, which is like an expression that she's made, which combines slaying and living. And I just love listening to her retelling and her upbringing and her raw experience of also being in the troubled teen industry and the advocacy she does it for it since. So to backtrack, um, to like the celebrity stuff. I remember when I was growing up, consuming the Perez Hilton websites. There was like one article saying that Perez Hilton is crazy. She's unhinged. She like jumped a fence with Britney Spears to try to escape. But then like she told a story how like they were kind of like corralled by paparazzi, kind of like they had no way to escape. And Paris Hilton's just really tall and able to jump fences. So she's like, hey Britney, let's just jump this fence. So when you hear it from her point of view, it's like, yeah, like why not? Why wouldn't you be able to? But back then, young, impressionable me reading the celebrity gossip was like, oh my god, they are so crazy and unhinged. So just stuff like that to hear like both to hear now like her side of the story, and just like no, it makes sense why she did what she did. So it's just interesting to see the other side. Or like back then, there's a picture of like Paris, Lindsay Lohan, and Britney Spears, the three of them in the front of a car and just driving away from a party. And there's like, I think the headline was like Bimbo Summit, which is like obviously like what the heck. But they were just looking to escape, and they just were being like hounded by his paparazzi. So it's just funny to hear like her retelling of these like iconic tabloid clips. And also, touch about the troubled teen industry. To give some background, Paris Hilton was kind of sent to this camp by her parents because she was just like so like out there, and they didn't know how she would like survive in regular school and that kind of stuff. And when I say regular school, I'm like regular celebrity private school. But it's because Paris Hilton lived with like undiagnosed ADHD her whole life, and she just wasn't able to like excel or conform to like regular private celebrity school. So her parents were sold on this idea to send their kid to this like institution where it'll get your like kid in check. And it's just crazy hearing Paris Hilton's like retelling of her experience there, because it's quite like traumatic and just so jaw dropping. And like these people that made these schools really exploited, I think, very wealthy parents to make them feel like, yeah, your kid's like messed up and they can only be fixed by hard love, and we're going to do it by like doing this like kidnapping, so they feel like they really need to like get their life together, which is like so messed up. Because I feel like now in 2024, most parents, well, I don't want to generalize, but I feel like there is this like people now know like treat your kids like people, and you have a conversation with them. You can't just get them a kidnap, even though it's a fake kidnapping, and sent to a school where they have to do all these things to not even be treated as humans, and then to be like just, I don't know, it's just crazy to hear about it. And like one thing that's just really jaw dropping for me was how she Paris Hilton was so forgiving of her parents. Like if I was her, I'd be like, oh my god, like f my parents to do this to me. But I think it just shows that she has gone through a lot of therapy. She's given her parents grace, and she realizes her parents were just sold on this idea, and she doesn't fault her parents for making a bad decision that I think truly impacted her. But Paris Hilton really focuses on how far she's come, how she's grown, and how she can give back and also be a voice to people that were oppressed during the or in the troubled teen industry. And also it's just so fun listening to Paris Hilton because she can be like a boss boss bitch and be very serious and very like just this great woman that is confident and knows what she's saying. And right away she'll be like really like ditzy, and like even she claims that her ditziness is this persona she like kind of puts out there, which I can definitely see. But it's also fun to see how she can switch back and forth between the two. And I think genuinely like part of her is this like kind of like light-hearted ditzy person, and it's totally okay. But she also has business smarts. I just love how like one thing in the audiobook that made me actually laugh out loud when she was reliving the trauma at her boarding school, and she was talking about all this horrible stuff that was happening as she narrates this audiobook, and out of nowhere she's like, okay, I need to bring myself to my happy place, thinking my platform boots at Burning Man. And I thought that was just so funny because it's kind of relatable, but just really funny to hear a celebrity talk about it that way. The next book I read was a book club book. It's called The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. I gave this a 4 out of 5. This was actually my book club's first book and movie club, because there's also a movie that came out in the 90s with Jude Law and Matt Damon, and I think it's Gwyneth Paltrow, and there was someone else. But the book was really good. It's actually a series, so we only read the first one for our book club. I actually downloaded the second one, so I would definitely check it out. I kind of enjoyed it. This book was interesting to read because it's an older book written in the 1950s. So there were some things in the book where I'm like, oh, that's kind of like weird, or kind of like definitely not something that would like be kosher now. And I really enjoyed it because it's the first book I've read in a long time where the protagonist is a male point of view. I feel like most books I read is written by a woman, and the protagonist is a woman. And I don't know if I just naturally gravitate towards that, or that's just what that's just what my sphere is. So it was interesting to read a book from a male protagonist point of view, but interestingly enough, the author is female. This book, I don't know what to say about it, because there's lots of twists and turns, but basically we meet Mr. Ripley. He's kind of recruited by his like loose acquaintance father to go to Europe to recruit his like loose acquaintance back to America, because his loose acquaintance is just in Italy or somewhere and just like enjoying the expat life but no desire to come back to America. So Tom Ripley goes to Europe on this loose acquaintance father's dime, and he basically gets this obsession with his friend or his loose acquaintance, and things escalate really quickly. And I don't really want to spoil it, but basically this book is just so interesting because it's so unbelievable, and it's interesting because it's kind of like a mystery book, but what, oh god, I don't know what to say about spoiling it. It's like a mystery book, but you know what the ending, or what the catalyst for all the mystery that is happening. So it's a very different point of view, and I thought it was like really interesting. And I will say the first 100 pages are kind of slow, but when the catalyst thing happens, the book is like really fast, really high action, and really good. So I really recommend this book if you want to look for something a bit older, a different kind of point of view, and it was interesting. And the movie's also kind of pretty good too, so I recommend that. The next book I read was also a book club book. It's called Kill for Me, Kill for You by Steve Cavanagh. Don't know if I said that right, I'm sorry, but his name is Be Here in the book. I gave this a 3 out of 5. Again, it's a thriller, so it's really hard to review about spoilers, but I will try. I really enjoy it because we meet the two characters, and it goes back and forth between the two characters. And for the longest time, as you're reading it, you're trying to figure out like what's the connection between these two characters. And then there was a click, and you're like, oh, and you kind of rethink about all the previous chapters you read, and if there were telltale signs, and you're like, oh, how will these two meet? This book was a solid 4 for me, to be honest. I really, really liked it. Um, but the only reason I gave it a 3 was because in the last possible second, there was a last twist, complicated layer, and I felt like there was no need to do it, and it could have just ended before that, and I've been satisfied. But the extra twist, I was just like, okay, now you're just being silly. Now there's too many twists and turns, and I'm not enjoying this. But solid thriller, and I really like the idea of how it touches on the themes of grief and how far one would go to avenge their loved ones. Because it made me think, like, if someone killed my partner, how and the cops wouldn't do anything about it, but I know who the guilty party is, how far would I go to seek vengeance? I don't know, it was interesting. I asked my book club this, and my book club is primarily women and with male partners, and a lot of us said we probably wouldn't do anything about it. But then I like tallied like men in my life, and a lot of the men in my life said they would avenge against for their partner. So yeah, it's interesting. The last book I read was a biography. It's called Escape from Camp 14 by Blaine Harden. And I gave it a 5 out of 5. And it's by Blaine Harden, but he's telling the story of a North Korean defect. So it's kind of like a memoir slash biography. And I don't know, I'm not sure how you could read a North Korean defect book and not rate it highly. I've read a few in my life, and I really enjoyed this one because it's Camp 14, which specifically is a prison camp in North Korea. And the guy telling Shin, the North Korean, telling his story, like, he was born in this prison camp, so he doesn't know what North Korea is like outside of his prison camp. And it's just interesting because they compare it to, like, oh, like, you know, for example, in World War II, when the Jews were sent to the Holocaust concentration camps, they knew life outside and they were sent to his prison camp. So they always had hope, and they always had hope that things could change and could be better, and things, for those that survive, were able to be better, hopefully, in their lives before they passed away. But for Shin, he was born in a prison camp, so he was given no hope. He had like biological family, but he had like no ties or love to them. So it's just interesting to hear about Shin's upbringing and how he fled and how he still struggles with being like a part of society. And I think some people give this book like bad reviews because it's such like a niche defect story that we can't really validate all the stories he's saying. And when you read it, it does come to light later that there are some details that he had was not honest with in the beginning when he was like telling his story. But I still think it's worth reading, and it's interesting to read about it and just to see when he was escaping. He actually was still in North Korea for a bit in the big cities before he like fled to China, and how like there were parts of North Korea that were still like cities and had markets and stuff, which is interesting. So I really enjoyed this. Oh yeah, and I also want to say, like, the reason why this is interesting is, unlike the other North Korean defect books I've read, a lot of these North Korean defects in these other books I've read, they were raised to believe that Kim Jong-sun or Kim Jong-il is like the eternal leader, praise the leader, and they really think North Korea is the best Korea and the best country in the world. But Shin, who's telling this story in this book, he wasn't raised with those ideals. He wasn't indoctrinated because he was raised to be like the slave in his prison camp. He had no value. So it's interesting to see, like, when he left North Korea and he eventually went to South Korea, he had no like weird, like, he had a lot of trauma, but he didn't have that weird like conflict about like, oh, but North Korea is the best. How could there be all this stuff that's elsewhere in the world that's so great? So it was interesting to hear his perspective. And yeah, it was a really great book. I recommend it. It is quite heavy though. Thank you for watching to the end of my reviews for August 2024. I would love to hear down below if you have read any of these books, and also if you think re-listening to audiobooks count as reading or is it cheating. I will see you guys next month. Bye!